Somewhere where I won't bother anybody anymore. Bye, Hugs. You're really being big kids today.
I think we're being very grown up about this. And that's great, because Gemma really needs our help.
She thinks Hugs has deserted her.
And he was her last friend in the world. But I don't think Hugs deserted her. I think he left for a reason.
Boys and girls, do you think that Hugs went to get help?
That's right. Hugs went to get help from Katie's teacher, Mrs.
There we go. It stops there. One of the things they said to us during the research and development was that we needed to include lots of interaction with the audience, that in order to keep them involved in the story, that we needed to ask lots of questions and give them the opportunity to answer. One thing we've learned over the years is that the kids always, 100% of the time, from day one, get the answers right. They all answer in unison. And I know it seems hard to believe. We didn't believe it until it happened. If the answer is yes, they all say yes. If the answer is no, they all say no. If the answer is give a variety of things, they all give a variety of things. But the students answer. And we usually have about 350 kids in every performance, and they speak up and they answer the questions, and they always get them right. When we ask them, as you'll see in a second, which way did she go, or what happened, where did she go? They all say she ran away. When we say, which way did she go? They all point to the door, even though we adults can't remember which door she exited from. Every one of those 350 kids will point to the stage right door, and they're always right, you know. So anyway, we'll show the next clip now, which begins. And Carrie, I'm going to point to it, but then stop it.
Get help from Katie's teacher, Mrs. Crenshaw, who works over at the rec center in the summer. Hugs knows it is very important that Gemma not keep this secret.
He knows that adults and children should never have secrets.
Okay, can you
No matter who the adult
pause,
is
Bruce?
or what the adult
Yes.
says.
He knows that Gemma should tell her teacher right away.
And if the first teacher doesn't listen, she should tell another teacher.
Or her school counselor, or a school nurse, a police officer,
Maybe her minister.
a scout leader, or her coach.
Are you still hearing that?
And she should keep telling
Yes.
me until somebody brings
Bruce,
her home.
did you pause?
I'm trying to, now I can't find the pause button.
It's almost time for our big scene.
Oh yeah!
Click in the center of the video. There you go.
Okay.
Oh, huh. What's the rush? Okay.
I'm still hearing it.
Wait, no, wait for me. Come on.
Try clicking in the center of the video to pause it.
Oh, I'm glad we finally made it, but Hugs, what's the problem? I don't see any emergency.
Well,
Hugs, who are you looking for? Is it Katie? Is she hurt?
I think I can't do it because it says I'm viewing Carrie's screen.
All right.
Press escape.
Rapunzel, and then you get to play the pirate.
And then on your keyboard, and then you should be able to see the
Why? Well,
window where the video is playing.
Fire. Hugs, someone was in trouble. I'm fine.
We're all fine.
Oh, would you look at that? Gemma left her Rapunzel hat in the middle of the floor. Good boy, Hugs. This is
Oh,
wrong.
come on.
Gemma's hurt?
Yeah, it's the one she wears in the summer musical.
Hugs, is Gemma in trouble?
There.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. So now, let's see.
While we're, one of the things we've changed over the years is we have to change the names of all the characters. Gemma is a relatively recent name because we found the name used to be Judy, and our kids said that sounded like their grandmother. So we had to get rid of the old names and change them to names that sounded more current. And we started out with Emma, and then Emma became the #1 most popular name for this age level. And there were so many Emmas in the audience and everybody went crazy. So we changed it to Gemma because we figured nobody was named that. So.
All right, here we go.
Crenshaw, who works over at the rec center in the summer. Hugs knows it is very important that Gemma not keep this secret.
He knows that adults and children should never have secrets about touching, no matter who the adult is or what the adult says.
He knows that Gemma should tell her teacher right away.
And if the first teacher doesn't listen, she should tell another teacher.
Or her school counselor. Or a school nurse. A police officer.
Maybe her minister.
A scout leader. Or her coach.
Some adult that she trusts, and she should keep telling until somebody brings her help.
Oh, I think we better get out of here.
Why?
It's almost time for our big scene.
Oh, yeah!
What? And here comes Hugs and Miss Crenshaw now.
Well, Hugs, what's the rush? Okay, I'm humming as fast as I can. Wait, no, brace your feet, come on. Oh, I'm glad we finally made it, but Hugs, what's the problem? I don't see any emergency. Hugs, who are you looking for? Is it Katie? Is she hurt? Hugs, you're so upset. I wish I could understand.
All right, so the first act ends with Rapunzel, and then you get to play the pirate.
I'm glad to see you. Are you okay?
Sure, Miss Crenshaw. Why?
Well, Hugs just dragged me up here like there was a house on fire. Thought someone was in trouble.
I'm fine.
We're all fine.
Oh, would you look at that? Gemma left her Rapunzel hat in the middle of the floor. Good boy, Hugs. This could have been
Wait
lost.
a minute, this is Gemma's hat?
Yeah, it's the one she wears in the summer musical.
Hugs, is Gemma in trouble?
Hugs says yes, Mrs. Crenshaw.
All right, gang, what do you know about this?
Nothing.
We just left Gemma 10 minutes ago. She was her usual moody self, but she seemed okay to me. Yeah, I don't know, Michael. She was pretty upset.
Wait, what do you mean by moody, Michael?
Well, I don't know. She just kind of seemed sad and confused.
And she kept saying all these really silly things.
Like what?
Like maybe Hugs didn't want to be cuddled.
Yeah, and like some family member had done something to her. Something to hurt her. Something she wouldn't explain. And then she really let Michael have it when he tried to give her a hug.
Yeah.
Well, I think I know what Gemma's problem might be, but I hope I'm wrong.
What do you think it is, Miss Crenshaw?
Well, kids, this world is full of a wonderful sensation called touch, and most touching feels very good.
Like a friend scratching an itch you can't quite reach.
Or your mom kissing your forehead to see if you have a fever. Or your dad rubbing your back to help you go to sleep.
Or a warm and loving hug. But some touching is not good. There's bad touching, like when someone beats on you, and that's awful.
Yeah, but no one beat on Gemma. I asked.
I know. But there's another kind of touching that can make you feel just as bad. It's called secret touching, and I'm afraid it can make you feel kind of creepy. And I'm afraid it's this secret touching that's bothering Gemma right now.
Hugs says you're right, Miss Crenshaw.
Am I right, boys and girls?
Well, how did you know what the problem was, Miss Crenshaw? I never could have guessed.
I knew Michael. Here you go, Hugs. I knew because when I was a little girl, I suffered from secret touching myself.
You did?
I did. It can happen to anyone.
Well, you seem just fine now.
Well, I'm certainly a lot better than I used to be, but it still hurts my feelings sometimes.
Miss Crenshaw, how did you get secret touching out of your life?
Well, in 2 ways. First, I told my Sunday school teacher, and he found someone to make my uncle leave me alone.
It was your own uncle?
Yep, my uncle.
And what was the second way?
I told my uncle, no.
You did? Well, didn't he get mad?
At first, but after a while, he learned that I meant it, and then he left me alone. You see, he knew that he was in the wrong.
Boy, I don't think I could ever say no to an adult.
Oh, sure you could. If someone does something to you that you don't like, it is your right to say no, no matter who that somebody is. It's your right to say no. It's your right to say, leave me alone. When somebody is touching you in a way that you don't like, just ask them to go. 'Cause it's your right to say no.
be afraid to stand up for myself. When somebody is going too far, doesn't matter who they are, I won't let it go on. 'Cause it's your right to say wrong. Each of us has the right to say, don't touch me that way. Have you never known that even though we are children yet, we cannot forget our bodies are our own. Our bodies are our own. And it's your right to say no. Right! Don't let secret touching get out of hand. It's never too late to say stop right now. That's one thing I can't allow. So please let me go. 'Cause it's your right to say no. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about.
Okay. I don't think I'm muted, so I think I can talk here.
Mhm.
One of the where she's getting ready to go, you'll be interested in this, is she says, well, let's talk about doctors. And then talks about how when you go into the doctor's office, you should feel the doctor may have to touch parts of your bodies that would be off limits for other adults. And one of the characters says, well, does this mean the doctors never touch you in a bad way? And the teacher says, no, it just means you should feel comfortable talking to your parents and other adults about anything the doctor does to you or says to you. But the reason I wanted to stop here is after It's Your Right to Say No, when we first did this at the National Conference for the National Committee of Prevention of Child Abuse, we got a standing ovation from this audience of 500 social workers at this point in the show, right after It's Your Right to Say No, because at that time in 1984, that was, the whole idea that it was okay to say no to unwanted touch if the one doing the touching was an adult, was something that most kids had been trained that it was not okay to say no. And the social workers were so pleased with this song that we got a standing ovation from the whole audience right in the middle of the show. It stopped the show, which was something that we certainly never expected. But speaking of stopping the show, we need to take our 5-minute break, and then we're gonna come and talk about the evaluation. Hannah, you'll lead that. But let's take our 5-minute break now, and then everybody come back in 5 minutes at 11:20, and we'll talk about the evaluation that takes place every year for Hugs and Kisses.
Bruce, I have the last video up already, so don't worry about sending me the link.
Well, and I think actually we're going to skip the last one and go on to the evaluation because we're running out of time.
Sounds good.
There we go. And Hannah, you'll take over this. I'm going to mute myself.
I have to unmute myself. Should I go ahead and get started? We're good. I think it's about 11:20. Okay. So Hugs and Kisses has been independently evaluated by 2 external evaluators for the last 24 years. And actually the last 10 years, it's been evaluated by Dr. Jimmy Young, who is now a professor at California State University, San Marcos, and Dr. Angie Mann Williams, who's at Eastern Michigan University. But we actually found both of these faculty members when they were getting their PhDs in social work at VCU. And so that was when they started with us, and then they just wanted to continue helping us with the evaluation after they left Richmond. And so over the years, we've determined that this program really has 3 components, and that is the prevention component, so helping children who see the show make sure that they don't experience abuse in the future. Then there's the early intervention component. So for students who are currently experiencing abuse, making sure that they get the help that they need. And then there's the component that we call the community conversation. And so that's putting forward these talking points that students can use to talk with their parents or to talk with their teachers, and sort of just establishing this common vocabulary, like Bruce was talking about the swimsuit areas and things like that, that can make it easier for students and teachers and students and parents to discuss these issues with each other. And so this evaluation mostly looks at the prevention component and then also the community conversation. And so there's 2 instruments that they use. The first is for teachers, and it assesses how prepared they felt before seeing the show to discuss these issues with their students and what it was that helped them feel prepared. So whether it was some of the ancillary materials that are included in the program, like the study guide or the in-service training or the pre-show video, or their prior knowledge or something else. And then it also assesses the discussion that teachers have with their students in the classrooms after seeing the show. So whether or not they did hold a discussion about the show and how long it was. The second instrument is a survey that gets distributed to students who see the show, students in all grade levels, so K through 5. And this is a questionnaire that consists of 7 questions. And over the years, our evaluators have used factor analysis, in particular principal components analysis, to refine these questions to develop the questionnaire into what is now a valid measure of the students' post-show knowledge of the play's key concepts. So they're looking at the 5 key concepts. And through this analysis, our evaluators determined that the questions really test students' understanding of one of 2 things. There's touch knowledge, which is their understanding of what secret touching is and how it's different from good touch and bad touch. And then there's action knowledge, which tests their understanding of what do they do if they or someone who they know is experiencing secret touching. This has turned into a really great tool because the analysis that they've done year after year of this questionnaire in and of itself has been very helpful. Like one example is there was a question at one point that asked, is a punch or a slap considered secret touching? The answer was no, that would be considered bad touching. But the students who were answering the other touch knowledge questions correctly somehow weren't getting that. And so they determined through their analysis that the word slap was confusing for students. And so they just changed it to, is a punch considered secret touching? And then the results became more consistent. So that's one of the benefits of having the same evaluators study the program year after year, is that the tools themselves become even more rigorous. Okay, results from student teacher question. Okay. So what they assess are first, students' knowledge of the play's key messages after seeing the play. And so the 5 key messages are the concept of secret touching. If you experience secret touching, you should tell a trusted adult. The private parts of your body are those that are covered by a swimsuit. Children have the right to say no to secret touching, and secret touching is never the child's fault. So these are the concepts that are reinforced throughout the play and in the question and answer period. And that's what the evaluation really focuses on, is to what extent the children are understanding those concepts after seeing the show. It also looks at the occurrence and duration of in-class discussions that are prompted by the play. So whether teachers do talk with their children after the show and how long they talk with them. It looks at teachers' use of some of the ancillary resources that are provided as part of the program. So that includes the CPS in-service training, the study guide, and the informational video that is offered to teachers as a resource. And also the teacher-reported effectiveness of these resources and the play itself in helping them feel prepared to recognize, discuss, and report child sexual abuse. So that's the teachers basically say, you know, how helpful were all of these resources in helping me feel prepared. And then also teachers' prior knowledge of child sexual abuse. So these are all of the things that the evaluation measures. And in recent years, selected teacher data has been linked to the data of students in their classrooms. And so that's to better understand the relationship between the resources that are used by teachers and the knowledge that is gained by their students. So the teachers will fill out their own surveys to say, here are the things that I did with my students. And then they'll package those surveys with all of the student questionnaires in their classroom. And the evaluators will look at how the students performed on the questions in relation to whether the teacher took advantage of the in-service training or the pre-show video or that sort of thing. And they can make inferences based on that about the effectiveness of each of those ancillary materials. So these are just some of the charts that I thought it might be helpful to include that are included in the evaluation. This just shows the number of surveys that are distributed and also get returned each year. And so as you can see, we've been working hard to increase the number of surveys that do get returned. And we've done so. So we're at about a little over 3,000 now children's surveys that we get each year, and little under 150 teacher surveys that we get returned each year. And so these charts show the average score for the student questionnaires for each grade level. As you can see, there's the most variability from year to year for kindergarteners. They're, of course, less predictable than the other grades. And so the evaluators have determined that an appropriate threshold for kindergarteners and first graders is a score of 70% or above on the post-show questionnaire, and they consider a score of 70% or above as having passed. For second and through fifth graders, they say that a score of 80% or above means that they've passed. And kindergarteners, on average, just most years almost get to that 70% mark. First graders always get above it. And then second graders nearly reach the 80% mark. Third, fourth, and fifth graders are pretty consistently above 80%. And this is the analysis of the length of in-class discussions based on the teacher's reports. And so this is just a helpful way to show how the teacher's use of ancillary materials impacts the length of their in-class discussions. On average, the teachers who did not receive in-service training or a study guide held class discussions that were shorter than the teachers who did. So the general themes are that the results are generally consistent from year to year. They've said that any variation in student responses in terms of how well they perform on the post-show survey is due to the resultant variation of student sampling rather than the play itself or the way that students on average are understanding the play. In general, students tend to more correctly or are more likely to correctly answer questions measuring action knowledge as opposed to touch knowledge. Also, when they looked at what was most helpful in preparing teachers to talk with their students about this, previous knowledge was the most important factor. But the second most important factor was the play itself. And they also determine pretty consistently that teachers who take advantage of the ancillary materials such as the in-service training and the study guide hold longer in-class discussions. So that's it for the HUGS evaluation. You're on mute.
Okay. Based on the successes we've had with Hugs and Kisses, the Attorney General's office approached us about 1.5 years ago and said, can you create something for middle schools that addresses the issue of human trafficking? Because we want to make sure that we're starting to educate middle school students about what they need to be aware of so that they're in a better position to protect themselves from potential human trafficking targeting. So going back to our model for success, it was developed 38 years ago and was used not just for Hugs and Kisses, but also for runners, which was runaway prevention and delinquency prevention, and then Walking the Line, which is alcohol and other drug abuse prevention, then Dancing in the Dark, which is child or adolescent pregnancy prevention. We contracted with George Mason to do a deep dive into existing academic research that exists in the area of human trafficking. And Hannah, can you review this, please?
Yes. So our community health and wellness program has a partnership with Mason ARC, which is Mason Arts Research Center. It's one of the 8 NEA-funded arts research centers in the country, and it's housed in the developmental psychology department at George Mason University. And so we work with them on a variety of programs, and Dr. Adam Winsler, who's a faculty member in psychology at George Mason, has evaluated some of our other programs, and for this, he led the creation of a white paper about human trafficking, in particular child sex trafficking. And we are using this in combination with research that I think Bruce will talk about in a little bit. That's more sort of the on-the-ground research that our research specialist has been doing over the past year. So I'm just going to do an overview of this white paper, and this is what our partners at George Mason put together on some of the academic research on human trafficking. So, like I said, we're focusing specifically on child sex trafficking, and they define that as the transportation, recruitment, and participation in the commercial sexual exploitation of a person under the age of 18. The child sex trafficking industry worldwide is estimated to be worth $39 billion, which is larger than the revenue of the NFL, NHL, NBA, and MLB combined. Victims come from diverse backgrounds, but populations more likely to be at risk include LGBTQ, ethnic minorities, and girls. It's noted that part of the reason that these populations are at a greater risk is due to the interaction between these demographics and the environment. So, for example, LGBTQ youth are more likely to be identified as runaway youth, which leads to instability. That's a risk factor for trafficking. Similarly, ethnic minorities are at a greater risk due to the fact that on average, they are more likely to experience the instability associated with living in poverty, which is also a risk factor. Additionally, in Virginia, African American children disproportionately represent cases of child maltreatment compared to white, Hispanic, and Asian children. And part of this, they note, can be accounted for by the bias in the system of child protective services in terms of who's referred and investigated and taken away from their families. So that's all to say it's important to understand that these demographic characteristics aren't risk factors in and of themselves, but rather it's the interaction of identities in the environment and the system at large that contributes to risk. And we also wanted to note that prior trauma and abuse can be the biggest risk factor for children to be victims of sex trafficking. And that's, you know, good for us to know in terms of the connection that we're making to Hugs and Kisses, since we are seeing this as sort of a next step after Hugs and Kisses. That the children who do come forward after seeing a performance of Hugs and Kisses are going to be at a greater risk for child sex trafficking. Now the white paper takes us through the legal protections, the evolvement of legal protection, or the evolution of legal protections nationwide for sex trafficking. Prior to 2000, there were few legal protections for victims. They were often forced into the criminal justice system. One big example of this is that prior to 2000, the term child prostitution was often used in legislation regarding human trafficking. It's no longer as commonly used. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 is considered the first modern anti-slavery law in the US. It declared that human trafficking is a federal crime, and it redefined minors involved in commercial sex acts as victims of child sex trafficking. And this led to the creation of safe harbor laws, which are implemented on a state-by-state basis. They divert victims of sex trafficking from the criminal justice system into the child welfare system. However, there are no national guidelines on how these safe harbor laws should be implemented, so there's great diversity in how cases of child sex trafficking are handled from state to state. And in fact, Virginia is one of the 13 states that does not have an established system or process in place to aid victims of child sex trafficking. And so many victims in Virginia are often prosecuted by the juvenile justice system, despite the provisions that have been set up by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Let's see. So to this date, Virginia is the only state in the US that does not provide legal protections for victims of child sex trafficking and continues to criminalize minors. So one of the pieces of this research and development that Bruce has talked a little bit about is how we're playing one small role in showing up and helping to establish this statewide safety net, as we did with Hugs and Kisses, to ensure that when these programs are implemented in the schools, that the children who come forward will be protected and that everyone's on the same page about the next steps for the children who do come forward after seeing the show. We can go to we are on the next slide. So now the white paper discusses some of the programs that have been studied through academic research. So of course, this isn't a comprehensive list of all of the programs that address human trafficking, but these are some of the ones they identified as having been rigorously studied and having demonstrated positive measurable outcomes. So one is called My Life, My Choice. It's based in Boston, and it provides youth victims a mentor who escaped human trafficking. Another is the Minnesota Runaway Program. It's a year-long nurse-led program in Minnesota, and it supports youth who have run away and experienced sexual exploitation. There are 3 components, and that is home or community visits by nurse practitioners, case management for welfare services, and therapeutic empowerment groups. And they also note some of the challenges for these intervention programs, the main one being that there's a need for long-term support to address the underlying vulnerabilities that the children face. As we previously discussed, the children who are victims tend to have a history of either housing instability or lack of familial support. and minimal resources for survival. Of course, not all victims have these vulnerabilities, but people who do are at greater risk. And so programs that provide some form of psychiatric or counseling services tend to have more success than those that do not. Sometimes victims might feel inclined to return to the commercial sex trade to meet their needs, which poses a challenge for these programs, not just to address the trafficking, but also to address the child's underlying vulnerabilities. And it was also noted that those programs were intervention programs, but also prevention programs should also focus on the underlying trauma that puts the child at a greater risk for being human trafficked, and should acknowledge that it's often the impact of this trauma that can misguide a child into a sexually exploitative relationship. And so then at the end of the paper, they made some recommendations based on this research. The first and foremost is, of course, to engage law enforcement and social service professionals, which is critical prior to the implementation, given that Virginia is a state where there's not adequate supports for victims of child sex trafficking. The second is to communicate that children involved in sex trafficking are victims and not criminals. And so I think that'll be similar to Hugs and Kisses, when one of the main messages was that it's never the child's fault. This will most likely be a similar message that is reiterated in this play. And third, to present a variety of the ways in which children can get recruited. So it's not just the ways we may immediately think of, but it can be through a family member, through peers, or through a romantic partner.
Okay. So as far as next steps go, we have assembled a group of, how many is on our advisory board now, Hannah?
34.
34 members of the statewide advisory board who are actively involved in human trafficking prevention and intervention throughout the Commonwealth. Once again, they come from education, from social services, from juvenile justice, from law enforcement, child psychologists, and all of the fields involved in the program. We have completed telephone interviews with each of them. We've written the 32-page white paper that summarizes their input on what they believe needs to be said to children and at what grade level. The grade level that they have determined is 5th grade, which is the top grade of elementary school, through 8th grade, which is the top grade of middle school. And so what we are projecting is transporting via buses, once schools are back in session, 5th graders into the middle school to see the program. The reason they wanted to include 5th graders is that the average age that human trafficking for both girls and boys begins in Virginia is at the 6th grade level. And so they want to reach 5th graders a year before they enter 6th grade. The main thing that we found out is that there is absolutely no agreement on what needs to be said to middle schoolers about human trafficking. And the main reason is there's so little information available on child sex trafficking that everyone agrees on. We've come up with all kinds of statistics that people quote, but we're finding among the professionals that there is a distrust of the majority of the statistics that are out there. The statistics that you hear most often are based on helplines and the number of kids who are calling into helplines, and that is viewed as being a statistical basis that we really should put little reliance on. There is an agreement that the majority of contacts, initial contacts, is through the internet, but that we don't know very much more about exactly what to say to students about those contacts. The big thing that there is a 100% agreement on is that law enforcement and social services both do not have any safety net in place yet in Virginia. All of this is very similar to the environment we were in with child sexual abuse in 1983. And so the good thing that is happening is the Virginia Department of Social Services and the Attorney General's office and the criminal justice departments are very much aware that they need to establish more common ground on all of these areas. So we are trying to get clarification on all of the issues that have been put together in the advisory council based white paper. And once we do that, we'll begin the one-on-one interviews once we no longer are in social distancing. One-on-one interviews with all the people on the advisory council to see if we can establish a better consensus of where the state is right now on the issue of human trafficking. Among our 3 initial partners, the one that has remained with us is Impact Virginia, Safe Harbor, which is great, and we greatly appreciate that. Safe Harbor, which was initially involved in the research, is withdrawn from the project, as has the Richmond Justice Initiative. Mainly, they are pursuing their own programs, and so we are in conversations with other programs around Virginia to see if we can bring them on. The groups that have come on thus far are Families Forward, again, and they've been terrific. And the Virginia Department of Social Services has been terrific, and the various sheriff's departments from around the state are very interested, and they've been participating. So that's where we are right now, and we are happy to answer any questions if there are any. Again, I apologize for the video was some rough viewing, and I wish it hadn't been that way, but I haven't figured out how to get video to show well on Zoom yet. So that's where we are. But if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Hearing none, I think we are ready to wrap up our presentation. Carrie, is there anything else you need from us?
No, it was really great to learn about that, and especially being able to see some of the scenes was very cool. So thank you.
We appreciate the opportunity, and if anybody does have any questions after the fact, we would be happy to answer them or share any of the information with any and all.
Bruce and Hannah, that was just an absolutely amazing presentation. We have 10 more minutes. If anybody wants to raise their hand, type in a question. I wanted to do a shout out to the folks coming from New York City. We have someone coming from Long Island, Eugene, Oregon, and Texarkana, Arkansas. Wow. And we have someone zooming in from Romania. So a shout out to all of you. So if anybody has any questions, please just unmute yourselves and speak. The mic is yours.
I had a question about how you all have been received by various law enforcement agencies around the Commonwealth as you've developed the human trafficking piece, and then also with Hugs and Kisses. Like if you all have found that partnership to be helpful or difficult, or how it's been.
It's been extremely helpful, and we have a terrific relationship with virtually every police department and every sheriff's department statewide, in every county and every city and every town with regard to Hugs and Kisses. You talk to pretty much any law enforcement person in the Commonwealth, and they are familiar with Hugs and Kisses, and they know exactly what to do when they are called to a school following a disclosure. We've been really impressed with the cooperation that law enforcement and social services have had with each other. When we first started out, there was very little dialogue between the two, and now there is really terrific dialogue. And so as it relates to human trafficking, some of the ill ease that was there in '83 with regard to child sexual abuse isn't there anymore. Right away, our law enforcement partners and our social service partners are starting out this time on the same page and are so eager to say, here are the holes in the safety net. We admit that we don't know what to do. Specifically with human trafficking, the big thing that we found out was it used to be a criminal justice issue in Virginia, and there were 16-year-old girls who were charged as child prostitutes. And when I say used to be, I'm not talking very many years ago. And that's all completely changed now. And there is no longer that eagerness for criminal prosecution of a 16-year-old girl or a 12-year-old, or, I mean, the average age that males enter into prostitution now or forced into prostitution is 11 in Virginia. And none of them are getting charged criminally, and no one even goes there anymore. So we found that the cooperation of law enforcement is really terrific.
There's a question in the chat about accessing the white paper, if that's something we can send out to people or a link we can send out. Is it so I can put your name and send it out, and maybe we can send it out to everyone after this.
I would be happy to. The white paper from George Mason is all proprietary. And I say that not because it will remain that, because we do not protect copyright on any of the work that we do. We want it all to be public information. It's proprietary right now because we're still in the vetting stage. But we can consider you all part of the vetting process and send out the George Mason white paper and send out the advisory council white paper. You'll notice when we do that there is note after note after note where we say documentation needed here. And that appears over and over, because when it was initially written, individual of the 36 members of the statewide advisory council, they would say, oh, well, here's a fact, and here's a fact, and here's a fact. And we would print them all as if they were facts. And now we're in the process of trying to document each and every one of those to make sure that we're identifying where each of the facts came from so that we know how much trust to put into it. As I said earlier, the thing that seems to be universally agreed upon is honest to goodness facts about human trafficking in Virginia are hard to come by. And most of it is speculative at this point. And so we're trying to nail down each and every fact that is put forward in the white paper. So everything we have, we're not releasing it to the general public, but we would be happy to release it to any of you.
If you all have a link that you're able to put copy and paste into the chat, I think there's a couple people who are interested. That might be the best way to get it to people.
And Hannah can,
Yeah, I mean, I only have a PDF. I'm not sure. Well, for the George Mason one, I just have a PDF.
Hannah, if you open the chat and see file,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, you should be able to share the PDF.
Yes.
But if not, just let us know. We can try to email it out.
Try to. Trying to exit out of. Okay, there we go.
and let me stress again that as we continue to move forward, by design, we do not copyright protect anything because we want the basic information to be in public domain so that anybody and everybody can use it. The other thing that I wanted to stress with Hugs and Kisses and with this new program is that we do not view any of these as a one and done thing where we go, okay, well, we presented that play, now that takes care of that. Everything that we do is to get a conversation started. It's not to be, none of it is meant to be conclusive. The thing that we have found that we're most pleased with is that parents contact us and say, I never knew how to discuss this issue with my child, but then I viewed the videotape through the PTA, or I went to see the show in the school, and now I know how to have a conversation with my child. So our work is all, here's how we get the conversation started. Here are some points that experts in the field all agree upon, as this is a way to talk to kids at this grade level about these issues. The issues are difficult and they're sensitive, and people don't know what to say. And then once they go, oh, I can express myself in these words, we have a lot of people that are very appreciative of that.
Awesome. So I guess as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you again to both Bruce and Hannah for being here today. We really appreciate both the work you do and you being here to spend your time with us. Before we break, I just want to hand over to Ben, another fourth-year student, just to wrap up with a piece about evaluations we're doing.
Hi everyone, I'm working on sharing my screen.
We see you.
Is that sharing my whole screen?
Yes, we can see the, oh, we could see it then.
Oh, is that the, okay.
We saw it a moment ago.
Okay, here we go. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about feedback for this session and for the whole symposium. The survey here, this link and the QR code are designed to be taken after the last session of the symposium that you plan to attend. So while we hope that you'll join us for the remaining sessions, if this session is the last session you plan to attend, we'd really appreciate hearing your thoughts. Also, if you'd like to provide immediate feedback for this session, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well through the same survey link. You can either, I will put the survey link in the chat, and you can also access it through this QR code with your phone.
All right, great. Thank you, Ben. So we'll keep that up until our next session starts. Again, Bruce and Hannah, thank you so much for being here and spending your time with us. And for those of you who are continuing with us for the rest of the day, our next session will begin at 12:15 and we'll break until then. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bruce and Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can hear you. I can hear you. I'm just. Roya, it's school.